Man oh man, I love indie games. Big developers like Nintendo and Sony aren't the only ones who can make quality titles. Oftentimes, small teams and even sometimes single people can make games that can match and even at times surpass the quality of major AAA titles. And it's finally time for me to talk about my favorite examples of this side of gaming. To make something clear, I'm looking at games that independent studios developed on their own. That's what qualifies as an indie game for this list. Alright, time to get this long overdue topic done. Let's roll! Starting off this list is a very recent indie game. I'm sure a lot of us have fond memories of Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, and that's for good reason. Those games are still super enjoyable even today. And apparently, Moonsprout Games seem to really enjoy them because their game Bug Fables is just like it. At its core, yeah, this is basically Paper Mario. Just replace a plumber and several partners with a snarky bee, a respectful beetle, and a cool as heck moth. The first thing I gotta address is just how much charm this game has. It really plays with the idea that you're bugs in a bug world. Buildings are made of boxes and teacups, giant soda cans litter the areas, and moths can use ice magic. What are you, stupid? Of course they can! Yeah, this game certainly has the aesthetic part nailed down, but how does it play? Like I mentioned, like Paper Mario. Battles are turn-based, and you perform attacks from the three party members with some kind of timing or reaction-based action command. And yeah, they are fun to execute, but a big reason this game couldn't make it any higher is just how draining standard battles can be. Enemies can oftentimes take multiple rounds to beat, and even though you can block attacks, it doesn't mitigate damage by a whole lot. As a result, I often found myself expending a lot of resources just to make it to the next town, and it could get pretty exhausting. I guess you could say it kind of bugged me. Okay, yeah, that joke wasn't good, but this game is absolutely good. Go check it out and get started on your little adventure. For a long time, I wasn't super into roguelike games. The genre as a whole just didn't catch my attention for various reasons. However, last year, I tried out Dead Cells at the behest of a good friend of mine, and now I can finally see what's so great about this genre. But I want to talk about Crypt and Necrodancer instead. Here we have hands down one of the most unique and creative games I've ever played. Necrodancer does play like a typical roguelike except for one detail. Everything you do must be done to the beat of a song. This means that movement, attacks, and even buying things at a shop must be done with a certain degree of finesse for the best results. While this might seem cumbersome at first glance, the game is built around it so well that it ends up working out superbly. Because enemies also move or attack on the beat of the song and each has a pattern to notice, you can usually predict how an enemy will move and behave long before you go to fight them. And this goes double for the boss fights, as they all provide a unique challenge with the rhythm-based gameplay. On top of that, the unlocks you find along your travels help out a ton. They're the usual fare, such as new armor and weapons, but they usually have a direct impact on how you fight enemies. Pro tip, grab the obsidian weapons, they are amazing. And if that were enough, there's even other characters to play as that all have their unique traits to change up the game, so it hardly gets stale. And with this being a rhythm game as well, the soundtrack is absolutely jamming, really helping the game stand out. And that music helps soften the blow when you end up dying again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again! But since the run of a zone is so short, it's really easy to pick yourself up if you die. All this together makes for a super memorable experience, and man, now I just want to dance! One of the first indie games I played was Super Meat Boy, way back in 2014. At the time, I really enjoyed it, but over time, I started to grow weary of the game. Sure, it's pretty fun, but there's a certain game that does what it's trying to do, but better. And of course, I'm talking about Celeste. This is a game where I'm sure its reputation precedes it, and that's for good reason. The gameplay is nice and fun and all, but what truly makes this game an experience all its own is how it handles its story. The tale focuses on a traveler suffering from depression who wants to climb this mountain because... well, because it's there. I'm sure a lot of us can connect with Madeline, and that's what makes this game stand out so much. She's conquering a daunting challenge to help her escape her feelings of depression and anxiety, and that's really inspiring. Of course, the story isn't the only part of the game. As I mentioned, this game plays a lot like Super Meat Boy, in that there are a bunch of rapid-fire challenges that ask you to get from one side of a room to another. Sure, it's pretty basic, but it's that feeling of overcoming these challenges that really drives this game forward. Like Madeline, we all want to conquer the challenge ahead of us, no matter how daunting it is. Plus, failure is punished very lightly, so you can just keep going at it. And by the end, I think we can all agree that this game is something to remember. When it comes to action games, boss fights are typically the highlight. In games like Bayonetta and Metal Gear Rising, these climactic battles are always the part of the game that stand out the most. What if there were an indie game that was nothing but boss fights? Just a series of fights to test your capabilities to react to all sorts of attacks thrown at you. I guess this was the thought process that led to the creation of Fury. This game came highly recommended to me by my pal Ren, go check him out by the way, and after playing it, I can see why I think so highly of it. As I described before, this game is essentially one huge boss rush as you fight to escape a prison. And yeah, these guards really don't want you leaving as they all put up really tough fights. At the same time though, you're quite dangerous yourself. Armed with a katana, a gun, and some insane speed, you are perfectly capable of taking down all of these guards. All of these fights are memorable for one reason or another, and while they don't all hit a perfect 10, there's only one I actively disliked. My personal favorites being the line, the edge, and especially the hand. Seriously, more games like this need boss fights against knights. It also helps that the soundtrack is adrenaline pumping and frantic, and the art style really makes all these flashy attacks pop. If you're the kind of guy who likes fighting over everything else, this game is for you. Now let's just hope you don't go furious. Hey guys, is Undertale still relevant? That is a trick question. It was never irrelevant. Even all these years later, Undertale still provides an experience that no other indie game can truly replicate. When playing most RPGs, you just see an enemy as a mindless beast and don't think twice about killing it. But here, that ideology is completely thrown out the window. Every enemy has a unique personality and traits that set them apart from others. And the best part is, you don't even have to kill them to advance. You can get to know them and choose to spare them. Sure, you won't get any health bonuses by being a pure pacifist, but really, you don't need them. When enemies attack, the battle switches to a game of avoidance. Every attack in the game can be dodged fairly easily as long as you don't panic, and it's just so much fun! Man, I talked about the battles so much and almost glossed over everything else this game does. The cast of characters is truly something to behold, with not one that is unlikable. They're all unique, charming, and quirky in their own way, and this is really shown in the boss fights, where they all come up with unique ways to tweak the method to avoid attacks. All of this together makes for an unforgettable adventure that I always love coming back to. Also, if you have the chance, pick up the Switch version. Not only will you have the game on the go, but there's also a unique boss with a bopping theme. Man, I'll never get tired of this game's soundtrack. One thing I always enjoy about indie games is their various visual styles. Most of the time, developers try to make their games stand out with aesthetic choices, and that really works wonders. One of the best examples that comes to mind is the recent phenomenon known as Cuphead. This game is the result of a labor of love between two brothers, and the blood, sweat, and tears really shows. The two were big fans of the rubber hose style seen in the 1930s, and wanted to implement that style in a video game after being surprised nobody has done that yet. And the result is one of the most visually pleasing games I'd ever seen. Everything in this game has so much personality and charm, and I love it. Of course, looks aren't everything. Unfortunately, the gameplay helps a ton with that. For the most part, this is a series of boss fights, and each one provides a completely unique challenge. All of them require you to be on top of your game, and most of them are just incredibly fun. Keyword there being most. There are also some run and gun levels, and they're fine, but the boss fights are the main event here. What's also really cool is that with all the coins you find, you can purchase all new attacks and abilities that can lead to all kinds of different styles of play. This is without a doubt an indie game that everyone should play. It's just that good! Oh man, now I finally get to talk about my favorite genre in the indie scene, Metroidvanias. These are my favorite kind of indie games because I just love exploring huge areas and being rewarded for my curiosity. And one of the finest in my eyes is without a doubt Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. Now I had known about Shantae for quite some time, but it took me a while to actually get around to playing this. But when I finally did, it blew me away. Unlike other games in this series, Shantae doesn't have any special powers since she lost them at the end of the previous game. However, we get something just as cool, pirate gear. Because of the looming threat of the Pirate King, Shantae and Risky Boots have to reluctantly team up, and as a result, Shantae gets to use Risky's gear. This includes things like a pistol for long-range combat and puzzle solving, a hat for gliding, a cannon for a quadruple jump, and boots and a scimitar for running super fast and just plowing everything in sight. All of the equipment you get makes exploring areas such a thrill, especially when you revisit areas for some hidden goodies. They also make combat so much fun to do, and that goes double for the boss fights, as they're all great. Something else I appreciate is just how funny and charming the dialogue is. Shantae is an adorable cinnamon roll that must be protected. All in all, this is a fantastic game, and definitely one of my favorite Metroidvanias. It's kind of odd how I haven't brought up any multiplayer games yet. The indie scene is certainly not short on fantastic games to play with friends, and while a bunch of them could have made this list, none compare to Armello. This right here is a game I never expected to sink so much time into. It originally started as a game a friend asked me to play with him, but over time it spiraled into, dear God, what am I doing with my life? That mild existential crisis aside, there's gotta be a reason I put so much time into this game. If I were to describe Armello in the simplest manner, I call it a game of politics, deceit, and murder. With furries! It's a battle of 4 heroes to take the crown, and you have to use every resource available to you. Capture settlements to earn gold to gain equipment and use tricks. Use your spellcasting abilities to damage or disrupt your opponents or to give yourself a boost. And when all else fails, kill the person you once considered your friend! Yeah, the battles ultimately come down to a roll of the dice, but there are more than enough ways to manipulate it in your favor for it to be a problem. On top of that, every character in the game has their own stats and passive ability, meaning there are so many ways to play this game. This is a multiplayer indie game that I'm sure everyone can enjoy, but don't go blaming me if your friends no longer want to talk to you afterwards. One of my favorite games I played in 2016 was the indie Metroidvania Guacamelee. It was a super fun game, had phenomenal humor, and compelled me to fully complete it. Twice. So why isn't it on the list then? Simple. It got a sequel that's even better. Everything that the first game did was treated even better in the sequel. The areas are so much more varied in their challenges, there are way more kinds of enemies to face, the upgrade system is handled way better here and has so many more options, and my favorite part is how the chicken form was improved. In the original game, it was a little more than a morph ball that looked really funny, but here, they give it the full moveset it dearly needed. Not only can you properly fight in this form, side note, suplexing a skeleton as a chicken is still ridiculous, but they even gave it additional movement options for even better area design. And then there's the game's biggest highlight. The writing. All throughout the game, there are just so many witty jokes, references, and memes sprinkled throughout that'll keep a smile on your face the whole time. And for the icing on the cake, there's a chicken Illuminati. Never in my life have I been so disturbed while laughing. My number one choice is a rather special game. It's the kind of game that, okay, I'm not even gonna bother with this build-up, you all know it's dust. Many things have changed since 2015, but even still, and even after the multitude of indie games I've played since then, not one has been able to top Dust and Elysian Tale. When it comes to things a Metroidvania and an indie game as a whole can do right, this game gets just about everything perfect. The lands you explore are all vast and varied, with all kinds of different challenges and enemies to throw at you, as well as multiple ways of traversal. And speaking of the enemies, the combat in this game is one of the reasons I hold it so dear. With a few simple combos, you can utterly devastate just about everything around you in a super flashy way. And since you're rewarded for getting as many hits as possible without getting hit yourself, the satisfaction when scoring a high combo is just immense. Not to mention, the game's presentation is absolutely stunning. All the areas stand out from one another, the character designs are all amazing, and the soundtrack is one of my absolute favorites. But of course, the biggest reason I love this game is for how well it handles its story. While the premise itself isn't too original, the way it handles its theming with harsh subjects such as racism is just too amazing for words. This game isn't perfect, as most of the boss fights are lackluster and the soaring meadow isn't exactly fun, but I can look past that for everything that this game does right. I'm not sure what indie games I'll play in the future, but I do know the massive hurdle that I have to overcome to claim my top spot. I'm Dragon, and I hope I've shown you some great games to try out. Well, that does it for this long overdue list. I was hoping to get this done sooner, but life got in the way. Hopefully the next list doesn't take as long. But before that, I got a new Let's Play coming soon. Well, until next time, this is Dragon, signing out.